I'm Ethan Reynolds, 32, a guy who left home with nothing but determination after my family made it clear my dreams weren't worth supporting. 5 years since I've been back for Christmas, standing on this familiar porch with success they know nothing about. My stomach knots thinking about the dismissive comments, condescending smiles, and backhanded compliments waiting inside. Yet I'm oddly calm. They expect the same failure they've always seen in me. Tonight, everything changes. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button as I share how I turned my family's biggest dismissal into their biggest shock. Growing up in Lexington, Massachusetts, just outside Boston, my childhood looked perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style home with its manicured lawn and white picket fence could have been a postcard for the American dream. But inside those walls, I was always the square peg in my family's round hole of expectations. My father, Richard Reynolds, built his reputation as one of Boston's most aggressive corporate attorneys. A man of rigid principles and even more rigid expectations, he mapped out our lives before we could walk. The Reynolds name stands for something, he'd remind us, especially when any of us threatened to deviate from his master plan. My mother, Barbara, came from old Boston money and dedicated her life to maintaining appearances. She was the quintessential socialite, charity committee chair, garden club president, an expert at making sure the neighbors never suspected anything less than perfection behind our front door. Her validation came through our achievements, but only the ones she could brag about at her club luncheons. Then there was my older brother Michael, the golden child. 4 years my senior and my father's carbon copy, he followed the blueprint flawlessly, captain of the debate team, Harvard Law with honors, and junior partner at our father's firm by 30. His perfectly white smile appeared in every family photo, usually standing right beside Dad while I was relegated to the edges. My younger sister Stephanie completed the family portrait as the baby and only girl. 2 years younger than me, she was brilliant and driven, graduating medical school at the top of her class and becoming the pediatric surgeon my mother could gush about to anyone within earshot. "Dr. Reynolds," Mom would say, her voice dripping with pride. And then there was me, the middle child, the dreamer, the disappointment. While Michael argued legal theory with Dad at dinner and Stephanie discussed medical journals, I was building websites in my bedroom and dreaming of startups. My entrepreneurial spirit emerged early. At 12, I started mowing lawns in the neighborhood, saving every dollar. By 16, I was designing websites for local businesses, charging just enough to build my portfolio. I remember the day I proudly showed my father the $500 check I'd earned from designing the local bookstore's website. "That's nice, Ethan," he said without looking up from his legal briefs. "But don't let these little projects distract you from college prep. Hobbies don't build careers." That was the pattern. Michael would win a mock trial competition, and my parents would take the family to celebrate at Boston's finest restaurant. Stephanie would ace a science fair, and Mom would frame her certificate prominently in the living room. I would launch an online store that made $2,000 in its first month, and Dad would ask why my calculus grade had slipped from an A to an A-. High school graduation crystallized everything. I'd won the Young Entrepreneurs Award and was scheduled to give a speech at the ceremony. It fell on the same day as Michael's baseball championship game. I sat alone on stage, scanning the audience for familiar faces that never appeared. Later that night, they returned home celebrating Michael's victory, having completely forgotten my moment. "Sorry, kiddo," Mom said when I mentioned it. "You know how important baseball is to your brother's college applications." I did know. Just like I knew my accomplishments would always be footnotes in the Reynolds family history. College was supposed to be my escape, but even there, the family shadow loomed large. I chose Boston University's business program despite Dad pushing law school brochures under my door weekly. "Business is for people who can't handle real academic rigor," he'd say, as if my 3.8 GPA meant nothing. During those years, I built 3 different e-commerce platforms between classes. One failed spectacularly, teaching me invaluable lessons about market research. The second broke even and showed promise. The third started generating real revenue by my junior year. That third venture, Logistics AI, became my obsession. I'd identified a gap in supply chain management software that nobody was addressing. The prototype I'd built attracted attention from a small angel investor who offered $75,000 in seed funding if I could work on it full-time. The day I told my parents I was dropping out of college to pursue my startup was apocalyptic. No son of mine throws away his education for some internet fantasy. Dad roared across the dining room table. The vein in his forehead pulsed dangerously as his face turned crimson. "Richard, calm down," Mom said, though her eyes reflected the same disappointment. "Ethan, darling, be reasonable. You're just 3 semesters from graduating. The investor believes in me," I said. "This is a real opportunity." Michael, home for the weekend, laughed from the doorway. "An opportunity to fail spectacularly? Come on, little brother. You're not exactly Mark Zuckerberg." Even Stephanie, usually the most supportive, looked concerned. "Maybe finish your degree first? As a backup plan?" They didn't understand. They couldn't see what I saw. The market opening, the potential, the timing, everything lined up perfectly. But they never bothered to understand my world. The argument escalated until Dad delivered his ultimatum. "You stay in school or you're cut off. Completely. No tuition, no allowance, no trust fund access. Your choice." I made my choice that night. Packed everything I could fit into my old Honda Civic and drove south toward Austin, Texas, a city I'd researched as an emerging tech hub with lower living costs than Silicon Valley. In my bank account, $800 of my own money. The trust fund and family financial support remained untouched in Boston. The next 5 years passed with minimal contact. Obligatory birthday calls. Brief, stilted Thanksgiving conversations on speakerphone, while I could hear the family celebration continuing in the background. 2 years ago, I called in for the usual Thanksgiving check-in. Dad put me on speakerphone just as I was explaining our recent software update. "Still playing with your computer program?" Uncle Frank's voice boomed in the background. "Leave him be," I heard Grandma Eleanor say. "At least he's doing something he loves." "Sure, but at what point do you grow up and get a real job?" Michael chimed in, followed by scattered laughter. I hung up and didn't call again until Mother's Day, keeping conversations brief and details of my life vague. Which is why the Christmas invitation this year caught me by surprise. A personal call from Mom, not a group text or formal email. "The whole family will be together," she said with unusual warmth. "It's time you came home, Ethan. It's been too long." I almost declined. Almost. But something pushed me to accept, perhaps curiosity about whether they could see me differently now, or maybe the lingering hope that blood might eventually be thicker than achievement. So I booked a flight to Boston, packed a simple overnight bag, and arranged for a modest rental car. If I was going to return to the lion's den, I would do it on my terms, revealing only what I chose to reveal, when I chose to reveal it. The rental car's GPS announced my arrival as I pulled up to the familiar colonial house on Maple Street. Christmas lights outlined the roof and windows with mathematical precision, my father's handiwork, no doubt. The same plastic reindeer had occupied the front lawn every December since my childhood, now looking somewhat faded and worn despite Dad's meticulous maintenance. I deliberately chose a mid-range sedan for my rental, leaving my customized Tesla back in Austin. No need to show my cards too early. As I killed the engine, I noticed Michael's BMW and Stephanie's Audi already parked in the driveway alongside Dad's Mercedes, the Reynolds fleet of approved luxury vehicles. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the bag of carefully selected gifts from the passenger seat and walked the brick pathway I could navigate blindfolded. Before I could knock, the heavy oak door swung open to reveal my father, Richard Reynolds, his hair grayer than I remembered but his posture still military straight. "Ethan," he said, extending a hand for a businesslike shake rather than a hug. "You made it." "Hello, Dad," I replied, accepting the formal greeting. "Merry Christmas." He stepped aside to let me enter the foyer where nothing had changed. Same antique grandfather clock, same family portraits arranged chronologically, same faint scent of Mom's signature pine and cinnamon potpourri. "Richard, is that Ethan?" My mother's voice called before she appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. Barbara Reynolds had aged gracefully, her blonde hair now highlighted to conceal the gray, her face showing only the most expensive and subtle signs of cosmetic intervention. "Darling!" She offered a quick, perfunctory hug that barely made contact before immediately turning away. "Stephanie needs help with the cranberry sauce. Make yourself at home, you know where everything is." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me standing in the entryway with my father, who was already checking his watch. "Michael and Amanda are in the living room with the kids," he said, gesturing vaguely before heading toward his study. "Dinner's at 6 sharp." The living room buzzed with activity as I entered. My brother Michael stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, holding court in conversation with our Uncle Frank. At 36, Michael had grown more into our father's image, confident to the point of arrogance, successful by any conventional metric, and completely unaware of his own privilege. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Michael announced, spotting me. "The prodigal son returns." He approached with the confident stride of someone who's never questioned his place in the world, his trophy wife Amanda following a step behind. Amanda, a former beauty queen turned corporate lawyer, assessed me with a quick up-and-down glance, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Ethan, you remember Amanda?" Michael said unnecessarily. "And the kids, Madison is 7 now, and Tyler just turned 5. The children barely looked up from their tablets, offering rehearsed "Hello, Uncle Ethan" greetings before returning to their screens. I placed their gifts under the massive tree that dominated the corner of the room, already surrounded by a mountain of expensively wrapped packages. "So, little brother," Michael continued, clapping my shoulder too hard to be entirely friendly, "still doing that internet thing in Texas?" Before I could respond, the front door opened again, heralding my sister Stephanie's arrival with her husband Grant, a cardiothoracic surgeon she'd met during residency. Unlike Michael's condescension, Stephanie's greetings seemed genuinely warm as she gave me a real hug. "It's good to see you, Ethan," she said, studying my face. "You look different. Healthy. 5 years will do that," I replied with a small smile. Grant shook my hand with the confident grip of someone who holds lives in his hands daily. "Stephanie speaks of you often," he said, which surprised me given our limited contact. The living room quickly filled with extended family, Uncle Frank and Aunt Nancy, their adult children Ashley and Brandon, and finally, my grandmother Eleanor, the family matriarch and my secret ally throughout childhood. At 82, Grandma Eleanor still carried herself with dignity, her keen eyes missing nothing as she made her way to me with her walker. "There's my brilliant grandson," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, reaching up to pat my cheek. "The only one with imagination in this entire family." I helped her to a comfortable seat, noticing the subtle eye rolls exchanged between my parents at her comment. When the initial greetings concluded, I found myself directed to a small folding table in the corner of the living room for appetizers, the same spot I'd been relegated to at family gatherings since adolescence. From this vantage point, I could observe without being observed, catching fragments of conversation about me rather than with me. "Doesn't look like he's doing too well financially," Uncle Frank murmured to my father. "Still single, of course," my mother whispered to Aunt Nancy. "Such a shame, he had potential," Aunt Nancy replied with a performative sigh. I maintained a neutral expression, focusing on the excellent imported cheese that my mother always splurged on for holidays. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could have purchased the entire gourmet shop where she sourced these delicacies, but here I sat, being pitted over brie. Eventually, Uncle Frank made his way to my corner, bourbon in hand and curiosity poorly disguised as casual conversation. "So, Ethan, tell me about this internet business of yours. Building websites for restaurants and such, is it?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was speaking to a child with a paper route. "It's a technology company, actually," I replied mildly. We specialize in artificial intelligence applications for logistics optimization. His eyes glazed over immediately. Sounds complicated. Making any money with that? We're doing all right, I understated, sipping my water. It's a growing field. Well, good for you, trying to make a go of it, he said, patting my shoulder condescendingly. Always have a place at Reynolds Legal if you decide you want a real career. I'm sure Richard would agree. Before dinner, Mom insisted on giving the newest family members, mainly Michael's wife Amanda, the obligatory house tour. I trailed behind the group, noting how little had changed and yet how much had been erased. The walls were still a museum to Michael and Stephanie's achievements, debate trophies, medical school graduation photos, professional certifications. My contributions to the family legacy had been minimized to a single high school graduation photo. The awards I'd won, the newspaper clippings featuring my early business ventures, all removed. Even my childhood bedroom had been converted into a home office, while Michael and Stephanie's rooms remained shrines to their youth. We needed the space for Richard's overflow files, Mom explained breezily when she noticed me pausing at the doorway of my former room. You understand, since you're not here anymore. The only person who seemed genuinely interested in my life was Grandma Eleanor, who cornered me in the kitchen while I helped myself to a glass of water. They still don't see you, do they? She asked quietly, her arthritic hand covering mine. Tell me the truth, how are you really doing out there in Texas all alone? For a moment, I considered revealing everything to her, the success, the recognition, the vindication of every dream my family had dismissed. But the dining room bell rang, summoning us to the table, and the moment passed. I'm finding my way, Grandma, I said instead, helping her toward the dining room. Better than they might think. She squeezed my hand knowingly. I always said you were the one to watch. I decided to maintain my cover through dinner, curious to see how the evening would unfold if they continued believing I was struggling. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification about our company's stock jumping another 3 points after the latest acquisition announcement. I silenced it without checking, focusing instead on navigating the next phase of this family reunion. The Reynolds family Christmas dinner had always been a choreographed performance, and this year was no exception. The dining room gleamed under chandelier light, the long mahogany table stretching beneath Mother's heirloom china and crystal stemware. Name cards marked each person's designated position, a hierarchy in card stock and calligraphy. Mine, unsurprisingly, placed me at the far end of the table, between Grandma Eleanor and Cousin Brandon, as far from the head of the table as physically possible without being seated in another room. My father occupied his throne at the head, with Michael to his right and Stephanie to his left, the golden children flanking the king. Everyone, please take your seats, Mother announced, directing traffic like an air controller at a busy airport. Richard is ready to carve. The Christmas feast emerged from the kitchen in stages. A 20-pound turkey bronzed to perfection, cranberry sauce made from berries hand-selected at the local farmer's market, green bean casserole with artisanal mushrooms, and Mom's famous herb stuffing that she guarded the recipe for like a state secret. Father stood with ceremonial gravity, knife and fork poised above the turkey. Before we begin, I'd like to say how wonderful it is to have the family together again. His eyes swept the table, but notably skipped over my position. The Reynolds family continues its tradition of excellence, and I couldn't be prouder. He began carving, the white meat sliced with surgical precision. The platter made its way around the table, Father's distribution system as methodical as everything else in his life. The choicest pieces went to Michael, then Stephanie, then extended outward in decreasing order of family standing. By the time the platter reached my end, only the less desirable dark meat remained. You always preferred the dark meat anyway, didn't you, Ethan? Mother called from her end, though I had expressed no such preference in my 32 years. This is fine, thank you, I replied, helping myself to what remained. As wine flowed and plates filled, Michael dominated the conversation, regaling the table with his recent courtroom victory against a major pharmaceutical company. The judge practically handed us the case after my cross-examination, he boasted, accepting nods of approval from our father. Biggest settlement the firm has seen in a decade. That's my boy, father said, raising his glass. Reynolds men are born for the courtroom. The conversation shifted to Stephanie, who detailed her medical practice's expansion and her recent publication in a prestigious journal. Mother beamed with each accomplishment mentioned, occasionally reaching over to squeeze Stephanie's hand in maternal pride. We're adding 3 new pediatric specialists next month, Stephanie explained. The demand for our services has been overwhelming. Dr. Reynolds is a miracle worker with those children, Grant added, his admiration for his wife genuine. The waiting list to become her patient is 6 months long. Several times, I attempted to join the conversation, only to be talked over or redirected. The technology we're developing has applications in medical logistics that could. I began when Stephanie mentioned hospital supply challenges. Speaking of hospitals, Uncle Frank interrupted. Did I tell you about my golf game with the chief of surgery at Mass General? After the third attempt, I simply observed, noting how little had changed in the family dynamic despite our advancing ages. We had merely grown into adult versions of our childhood roles, Michael the achiever, Stephanie the perfectionist, and me, the afterthought. So, Ethan, Uncle Frank finally addressed me directly during a lull in conversation, swirling his expensive Cabernet. What exactly do you live on down in Austin? Those internet startups can't pay much until you hit it big, if you ever do. All eyes turned to me, some curious, others containing poorly disguised pity. I manage, I replied simply. The company is growing. Growing companies often operate at a loss. Michael chimed in with the confidence of someone who has never had to bootstrap anything. Are you taking on debt? Michael, Stephanie warned quietly. It's a fair question, my father defended. Financial planning is important, and Ethan hasn't always shown the best judgment in that area. I'm doing fine financially, I stated firmly. Well, there's no shame in struggling a bit while building something, Mother offered in what she probably thought was support. We just worry about your security, especially at your age. Most men are established in their careers by 32. Like Michael was, Father added unnecessarily. I'm established in my career, I countered. Of course you are, dear, Mother patted the air dismissively. Now, who wants more cranberry sauce? The conversation mercifully shifted to Michael's children and their private school achievements, giving me a moment to breathe. Beside me, Grandma Eleanor patted my knee under the table. They still can't see past their own expectations, she whispered. Their loss. When dessert arrived, Mother's pavlova for Michael, his favorite, pumpkin cheesecake for Stephanie, her preference, and various other options catering to everyone's taste, I noticed there wasn't a single dessert I favored among them. Not that I expected chocolate bourbon pecan pie, my longtime favorite, but the oversight felt pointed. Oh, Ethan, I forgot you don't care for pavlova, Mother said when I passed on the dessert. You've always been the odd one out with your preferences. The odd one out. A lifetime summarized in 4 words. As coffee was served, Father cleared his throat with the authority of a judge calling a courtroom to order. We have a Reynolds family tradition to uphold, he announced. The annual gift exchange awaits us in the living room. A flutter of excitement passed through the younger family members, while the adults exchanged knowing smiles. I had spent considerable time selecting gifts for everyone, thoughtful items based on knowing them better than they realized. Despite everything, I wanted my return to include some gesture of goodwill. As everyone migrated toward the living room, I hung back, helping Grandma Eleanor from her chair. She clutched my arm with surprising strength. Whatever happens in there, she said with unusual intensity, remember who you are, not who they think you are. Her words carried a prescience that would prove remarkable in the minutes to come. The Reynolds family gift exchange had always been a production rivaling Broadway in its staging and dramatics. The living room had transformed into a showcase of holiday excess, the 12-foot Douglas fir drowning in ornaments collected over generations, professionally wrapped packages arranged in architectural precision beneath it, and holiday music providing an orchestral backdrop to the proceedings. Father took his position beside the tree, assuming the role of master of ceremonies as he had every Christmas of my life. Mother sat in her designated armchair, notepad in hand to record who received what, ostensibly for thank you card purposes, but everyone knew it was really for comparison and future reference. Before we begin, Father announced, straightening his cashmere sweater, I want to say that family is the greatest gift of all. He smiled benevolently around the room, his gaze lingering on Michael's perfect family tableau. The Reynolds name carries with it not just expectations, but a legacy of excellence, achievement, and tradition that I see continuing into the next generation. Michael's children, Madison and Tyler, fidgeted impatiently on the floor nearest the gift mountain, their eyes wide with anticipation. Stephanie and Grant sat hand in hand on the love seat, while Michael and Amanda occupied the sofa's prime position. Extended family filled the remaining seating, with Grandma Eleanor in her designated armchair by the fireplace. I found myself standing against the wall, no seat having been left available. We'll proceed in age order, youngest to oldest, as tradition dictates. Father continued, consulting the list Mother had prepared. Tyler, at 5, went first, tearing through a mountain of presents that included the latest gaming console, designer clothes, and enough toys to stock a small store. Madison followed with an equally impressive haul featuring the newest iPhone, a junior designer handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a certificate for horseback riding lessons at the exclusive Lexington Equestrian Center. The adults exchanged gifts of increasing extravagance. Michael received a set of custom golf clubs from our parents. For the country club membership we've arranged for you, while Stephanie unwrapped a diamond tennis bracelet and spa retreat vouchers. Michael gifted Amanda with a luxury weekend in New York, while Stephanie and Grant exchanged matching Rolex watches. Extended family members received their share, Uncle Frank's rare Scotch collection edition, Aunt Nancy's spa package, and cousins Ashley and Brandon's respective designer accessories. My gifts to them were opened with perfunctory acknowledgement, the rare first edition history book for Dad that he glanced at briefly before setting aside, the artisanal cooking class series for Mom that earned a polite "How thoughtful!" the custom cufflinks for Michael that he examined with barely concealed indifference. Only Grandma Eleanor showed genuine appreciation for her gift, a digital photo frame I'd preloaded with restored images of her late husband and childhood home, along with a custom-built app that would let her easily add new photos without technical frustration. "Oh, Ethan," she said, her eyes misting as she scrolled through memories long thought lost to time. "This is magical. How did you find these pictures?" "I have resources," I replied simply, smiling at her genuine reaction. As the unwrapping frenzy continued, I noticed a pattern emerging. Every person in the room had received multiple gifts, their laps filled with torn wrapping paper and new possessions. Every person except me. The realization didn't hit all at once. At first, I thought perhaps my gifts were simply buried deeper under the tree. Then, as the pile dwindled and my name remained uncalled, I wondered if they had been misplaced somewhere else in the house. But as the final present was distributed, a monogrammed leather portfolio for Cousin Brandon, an awkward silence descended upon the room. Madison, with the unfiltered honesty of a 7-year-old, looked around and pointed at me. "Uncle Ethan didn't get any presents," she announced to the room. All eyes turned toward me, a spectrum of expressions crossing their faces, embarrassment from Stephanie, smug amusement poorly disguised on Michael's face, and something unreadable in my father's tight expression. The silence stretched uncomfortably until my mother gave a dismissive laugh, waving her hand as if shooing away an insignificant insect. "Oh, we forgot you, Ethan!" she exclaimed with theatrical surprise that fooled no one. "Well, we weren't sure you were coming until the last minute, and you know how early I do my Christmas shopping." "Right," my father added gruffly. "And you're an adult. Adults don't need Christmas presents." I glanced pointedly at the pile of adult gifts scattered around the room, but said nothing. Michael, never missing an opportunity, reached for his wallet. "Hey, little brother, I can spot you some cash if you're feeling left out." he offered, the condescension in his voice unmistakable. I have a gift certificate somewhere I haven't used. Stephanie added with more genuine concern. You're welcome to it. We really didn't think you'd mind. Mother continued, her tone suggesting I would be unreasonable to feel otherwise. You've always been so independent. The collective expectation in the room was palpable. They anticipated hurt, embarrassment, perhaps even anger, the reactions of the perpetual disappointment they believed me to be. Cousin Ashley looked at her feet, uncomfortable with the obvious exclusion. Uncle Frank studied his Scotch with sudden interest. Grandma Eleanor watched me intently, her eyes communicating silent support. In that moment, I had a choice. I could react as they expected, the overlooked middle child, the family failure, the perpetual afterthought. Or I could change the narrative entirely. I took a deep breath, feeling an unexpected calm settle over me. 5 years ago, this exclusion would have cut deeply. Today, it merely confirmed what I'd already known, that returning hadn't been about seeking their approval, but about closing a chapter. It's okay, I said with a genuine smile that confused them more than anger would have. Look what I got myself. The room fell into curious silence as I maintained my enigmatic smile. Mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, while Father's eyebrows furrowed in confusion at my lack of expected reaction. Michael's smug expression faltered slightly. What do you mean? Stephanie finally asked, breaking the awkward silence. I casually pulled back the sleeve of my simple Oxford shirt to reveal my watch, not flashy from a distance, but unmistakable to anyone who recognized fine timepieces. Is that a... Michael squinted, his voice trailing off. Patek Philippe Nautilus, I confirmed casually. Limited edition. They only made 50 of them. Father, a watch enthusiast himself, inhaled sharply. That's $100,000 watch. 135, actually, I corrected gently. My company had a good quarter. Company? Uncle Frank echoed, setting down his Scotch. The website thing? Logistics AI, I stated, deciding the moment had arrived to end the charade. We specialize in artificial intelligence solutions for supply chain optimization. The company I dropped out of college to start 5 years ago against everyone's advice. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling to a recent news article and handing it to Grandma Eleanor first, a small gesture of respect for the only person who had believed in me. She adjusted her glasses, a smile spreading across her face as she read. Logistics AI reaches $340 million valuation after Series C funding. She read aloud, her voice carrying clear pride. Founded by Wunderkind CEO Ethan Reynolds. 340 million? Michael sputtered, the number registering with satisfying impact. That was 3 months ago, I replied evenly. We closed another round last week. We're approaching $500 million now. Mother's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace, her social calculating visibly recalibrating. Ethan, darling, why didn't you tell us? When would I have done that? I asked quietly. Between being told about Michael's latest court victory and Stephanie's medical achievements. Or perhaps during the conversations where no one asked about my life. Father cleared his throat, his expression a complicated mix of disbelief and dawning realization. Surely you're exaggerating the numbers. Forbes doesn't exaggerate, Dad. I took my phone back from Grandma and pulled up another article. They listed me in their 30 under 35 foot feature last month. Revolutionizing global logistics with proprietary AI algorithms that have saved Fortune 500 companies over $2 billion in supply chain costs. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as my family processed this information. Michael's face had turned an interesting shade of red, while Mother appeared to be calculating all the social opportunities she had missed by not knowing of my success. We have offices in Austin, Singapore, and London, I continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. We're opening in Dubai next quarter. We employ over 200 people, and our client list includes companies whose products you use every day. Uncle Frank, always quick to spot opportunity, leaned forward. That sounds like quite an operation, Ethan. Have you considered bringing in family investors? I have some capital I could move around. Our last funding round was oversubscribed by 60%. I cut him off politely but firmly. We're selective about our investors. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone, scrolling through photos. This is my house on Lake Austin, I said, showing a stunning modern structure of glass and stone overlooking the water. And my place in Manhattan for when I'm meeting with East Coast clients. Each image landed like a body blow to the family's collective perception. The lakefront property with its infinity pool and private dock. The Manhattan penthouse with views of Central Park. My executive team at our annual retreat in Bali. I funded tech education centers in 3 developing countries last year. I continued, showing photos of smiling students at computer stations bearing the Logistics AI logo. We're particularly proud of our scholarship program for underprivileged students interested in STEM fields. Grandma Eleanor beamed with each revelation, occasionally shooting triumphant glances at my parents. Stephanie studied the photos with genuine interest, while Grant looked increasingly impressed. Even Michael's children had abandoned their new toys to listen to this unexpected turn of events. You've done well for yourself. Father finally managed, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I have, I agreed simply. Why didn't you tell us any of this before? Mother asked, a hint of accusation in her voice, as if my success had somehow been kept from her maliciously. I'm telling you now, I replied. Then I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out a leather-bound album. This is what my life has looked like for the past 5 years that no one asked about. I handed the album to Grandma Eleanor first, who began paging through it with reverent attention. Photos documented my journey, the tiny apartment where I'd started the company, the first team of 4 people working around a salvage conference table, the gradual expansion into legitimate offices, the awards ceremonies, the speaking engagements at technology conferences, the charity galas. The album made its way around the room, each family member studying it with increasing disbelief. Mother's hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages, pausing at a photo of me shaking hands with a former U.S. president at a technology summit. I didn't come here expecting gifts, I said into the silence. I came to see if anything had changed, if there was still a place for me in this family beyond being the perpetual disappointment. I let my gaze move around the room, making brief eye contact with each person. I didn't build my company to prove you wrong, though that would have been reason enough. I built it because I believed in my vision when no one in this room did. I believed in myself when you all made it abundantly clear you didn't. The weight of 5 years of dismissal, of condescension, of being the family footnote hung in the air between us. I didn't come for gifts, I repeated, my voice steady. I came to see if anything had changed. The complete silence that followed was answer enough. The silence lasted precisely 4 seconds before the room erupted into chaos. My father recovered first, his attorney instincts kicking in as he attempted to reframe the narrative. Son, he began, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used in depositions. We always knew you had potential. That's why I pushed you so hard. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. It was tough love, he continued, gaining confidence. You needed that push to achieve your full potential. And look at you now, proof that my approach worked. Mother fluttered around the edges of the conversation like a nervous butterfly, her social instincts in overdrive. Ethan, darling, I just remembered we have that chocolate bourbon pecan pie you love in the kitchen. Let me go warm a slice for you. She disappeared toward the kitchen, already planning damage control. Michael's transformation was the most remarkable, the condescension vanishing as he mentally recalculated our relationship's power dynamic. This is incredible, little brother, he said, approaching with hand extended. We should grab lunch while you're in town. I'd love to hear more about this AI stuff. I've always been fascinated by artificial intelligence, Amanda added, suddenly appearing at Michael's side. Uncle Frank materialized beside me, business card extended. My investment group would still be interested in discussing opportunities. We have significant capital available for the right ventures. We should catch up properly, Stephanie said, and unlike the others, her eyes showed genuine regret. I'd like to hear about your journey. Cousin Ashley approached shyly. I actually use your software at my company. I never connected that it was your startup. The barrage continued, congratulations, questions, sudden recollections of how they'd always supported my entrepreneurial spirit, and invitations to exclusive clubs, dinners, and events. Father mentioned associates I simply must meet, while Michael suggested a round of golf at his country club. Grandma Eleanor watched it all with quiet satisfaction before catching my eye and giving me a subtle nod toward the door, her silent permission to escape if I wished. I appreciate everyone's interest, I said, interrupting the chorus of newfound supporters, but I think I'll call it a night. It's been a long day of travel. But you can't leave now, Mother protested, returning with a slice of pie. We have so much to catch up on. We've had 5 years to catch up, Mom, I replied gently. Tonight wasn't the time, apparently. At least stay for breakfast tomorrow, Father pressed. We can talk business properly. I have an early flight, I lied smoothly. Another time, perhaps. I made my way around the room, saying brief goodbyes. Michael pressed his business card into my hand with a conspiratorial, "Call me, we should discuss potential synergies." Amanda air kissed near my cheek, careful not to make actual contact. Uncle Frank and Aunt Nancy insisted I visit them next time I was in Boston. When I reached Grandma Eleanor, I bent down to give her a proper hug. She held on tightly, whispering, "I always knew, Ethan. Always. Thank you for seeing me," I whispered back, meaning it more than she could know. Stephanie and Grant walked me to the door, apart from the others. "I'm sorry," Stephanie said quietly. "I should have stayed in better touch." "It goes both ways," I admitted. "I could have reached out more too." "Still," she pressed, "what they did tonight with the gifts was cruel, whether you're successful or not." I shrugged. It was illuminating, if nothing else. "Will you really not stay until tomorrow?" she asked. "I think it's better this way," I replied. "But I'll text you before I leave town. Maybe coffee, just us?" She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "I'd like that." As I stepped out into the cold December night, my phone buzzed with notifications, LinkedIn requests from Michael and Uncle Frank, a text from Mother about brunch options for tomorrow, an email from Father suggesting a meeting with his investment advisor. I silenced the phone and drove to the Four Seasons downtown where my actual reservation awaited. As I settled into the luxury suite, a far cry from the twin bed in my old room that Mother had suggested I use, I reflected on the evening's events. The messages continued through the night. "Mother, 10:47 p.m. There must have been a miscommunication about the gifts, darling. We would never intentionally exclude you." "Father, 11:15 p.m. Your business acumen is impressive, son. We should discuss how to integrate your company with the Reynolds portfolio." "Michael, 11:32 p.m. Bro, seriously impressed. Let's talk tomorrow. I know people who could take your company to the next level." Uncle Frank, 12:03 a.m. My investment group would offer very favorable terms. Family advantage. I responded only to 2 messages. To Grandmother Eleanor, "Thank you for always believing in me. I'll visit properly before heading back to Austin. Love you." To Stephanie, "Coffee tomorrow at 10? The cafe on Newberry Street we used to sneak off to during high school?" Her reply came immediately, "I'll be there." And Ethan? "I'm proud of you. Not because of the money. Because you followed your dream." The next morning, Stephanie arrived at the cafe looking nervous but determined. She'd always been the family peacemaker, caught between Michael's golden child status and my black sheep role. "They're in complete damage control," she reported, stirring her cappuccino. "Dad's researching your company, Mom's telling her friends she always knew you'd be successful, and Michael's furious that you didn't respond to his messages." "And how are you?" I asked, more interested in her than the others. She sighed, looking into her coffee. Ashamed, honestly. I knew how they treated you was wrong, but I never stood up for you properly. I was so focused on earning my own place that I didn't see how much worse it was for you. You were a kid too, Steph. But I'm not now, she countered. And I've let it continue. We talked for nearly 2 hours, really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults. She shared her struggles with perfectionism, the pressure of being the only daughter, her genuine love of medicine complicated by our parents' expectations. I told her about the early days of my company, the ramen noodle dinners, the sleepless nights, the rejections before the first breakthrough. They'll never understand what you built, she said finally. Not really. They'll see the valuation, the prestige, the external validation. But they'll never understand the vision or the courage it took. I know, I agreed. But I didn't build it for them. As we parted, she hugged me tightly. Don't be a stranger, Ethan. Not to me, at least. I won't, I promised, meaning it. Later that afternoon, I visited Grandma Eleanor at her assisted living facility, bringing her favorite eclairs and spending hours helping her set up the digital frame properly. As I was leaving, she pressed something into my hand. This was meant for you long ago, she said. It was a small box containing my grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom traditionally passed to the most promising grandson. I'd always assumed it would go to Michael. He would have seen you clearly, she said softly. He always valued vision over convention. I clutched the watch, the first meaningful gift I'd received from my family in years. Thank you, I whispered, my throat tight. The remainder of my Boston trip passed without further family interaction, despite numerous attempts from my parents and Michael to arrange meetings. I sent polite but firm declines, citing work commitments. As my plane lifted off from Logan International 3 days later, I reflected on what had changed and what hadn't. The family dynamic remained fundamentally broken, but for the first time, I wasn't broken with it. 3 months passed after the Christmas revelation, bringing subtle but significant shifts in the Reynolds family ecosystem. Like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake, the family structure hadn't been destroyed, merely reconfigured into a new reality where I was no longer the designated failure. My father's communication style transformed most dramatically. Gone were the dismissive comments and unsolicited career advice, replaced by awkward attempts at professional respect. His emails arrived with clockwork regularity, each one referencing news articles about logistics AI or suggesting potential business connections that might interest me. Saw your company mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. One typical message began. Impressive quarterly growth. I've forwarded the article to several partners at the firm. He never directly mentioned the Christmas incident, or apologized for years of dismissal, but in his world, acknowledgement of success was the closest thing to an apology I could expect. Mother's approach was more transparent in its performative nature. She'd taken to mentioning me prominently in conversations with her friends, according to Stephanie. My son Ethan, the tech CEO, had apparently become one of her favorite phrases, despite having shown zero interest in my career until its monetary value became clear. Her messages arrived laden with manufactured maternal concern. Darling, I saw that awful construction on the Austin highways on the news. Are you taking care of yourself with all that traffic stress? Never mind that I lived nowhere near the construction in question. Michael's response proved most predictable. After several ignored messages about catching up, he pivoted to professional networking attempts, culminating in an invitation to speak at his alma mater's business school. The entrepreneurship department would be honored to have you share your journey, he wrote, conveniently omitting that he'd once called that same journey a delusional waste of tuition money. I declined politely, citing scheduling conflicts. The only relationship that genuinely evolved was with Stephanie. Our coffee meeting had opened a channel of authentic communication that continued through regular video calls and text exchanges. Unlike the others, she never asked for business connections or investment opportunities, focusing instead on rebuilding our sibling bond. I told Dad to stop sending you those articles, she confessed during one call. I said you probably know your own company's news better than he does. Bold move. I laughed. How'd he take it? About as well as you'd expect. She rolled her eyes. But he needed to hear it. Setting boundaries became my primary focus in the months following Christmas. I responded to family communications on my terms, engaging where it felt healthy and maintaining distance where it didn't. The power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the supplicant seeking approval, but an equal, or more, deciding how much access to grant. For my birthday in March, a flood of gifts arrived from Boston, expensive tokens from my parents, premium whiskey from Michael, and thoughtful books from Stephanie. The contrast with Christmas couldn't have been more stark, highlighting the transactional nature of their newfound interest. Only Grandma Eleanor's gift, a handwritten collection of her favorite family recipes, carried genuine sentiment. For when you're ready to build more than companies, her note read, making me smile. I channeled my complicated family feelings into constructive outlets. The Richard and Barbara Reynolds Scholarship for Entrepreneurial Innovation launched with a $2 million endowment, providing full college funding for students from underprivileged backgrounds with promising business ideas. Why name it after them? My COO asked when I announced the foundation. Because giving other people the support I never received feels like the right kind of closure, I explained. The family's reaction to the scholarship announcement revealed everything. Father interpreted it as a status symbol, proudly mentioning the Reynolds Scholarship to colleagues. Mother focused on the social capital it provided. Michael seemed irritated that I hadn't consulted him on the legal structure. Only Grandma Eleanor understood the deeper meaning. Healing comes in unexpected forms, she noted during her visit to Austin in April. I'd flown her first class to Texas for a week, giving her the grand tour of our headquarters and my lake house. Watching her 82-year-old face light up as I showed her our AI systems and introduced her as my first supporter to my executive team provided more satisfaction than any revenge fantasy could have. Your grandfather would burst with pride, she told me as we sat on my deck overlooking the water. Not just at what you've built, but at how you've built it, with integrity and purpose. I wish he could have seen it, I admitted. Oh, he sees it, she assured me with conviction. Just like he saw you clearly when others didn't. The family therapy sessions I anonymously sponsored began in May, a gift arranged through Stephanie for our parents and Michael, though I declined to participate. Some relationships need professional help, I told Stephanie when she asked why I'd paid for something I wouldn't attend. And some need distance. My journey from dismissed son to empowered individual hadn't been about proving my family wrong, though that satisfaction couldn't be denied. It had been about proving myself right. The victory wasn't in the balance sheet or valuation, but in the vindication of my vision and the life I'd created beyond the narrow confines of the Reynolds legacy. Financial success hadn't fixed my family's dysfunction, it had merely amplified existing dynamics and made them impossible to ignore. Money was a magnifying glass, not a cure. The parents who couldn't see value in my dreams before couldn't truly appreciate the vision that created my success now. They could only recognize the external metrics of achievement. I'd learned that chosen family often provides what biological connections cannot. My executive team, who'd believed in logistics AI when it was just an idea in a cramped apartment. My early investors, who saw potential where my father had seen only risk. My friends in Austin, who celebrated each milestone without keeping score. These relationships, built on mutual respect rather than obligation, had become my foundation. Forgiveness, I discovered, wasn't about absolving others of responsibility, but liberating myself from the weight of resentment. I didn't forgive my family to free them from guilt, I forgave them to free myself from the pursuit of their approval. That freedom proved more valuable than any validation they could belatedly offer. By summer, the dust had settled into a new normal. I maintained limited contact with my parents, engaging primarily around holidays and major events. Michael and I established a cordial but distant relationship, the competitive undercurrent never fully dissipating. Stephanie and I grew closer, building the sibling relationship we should have had all along. and Grandma Eleanor remained my most treasured family connection. Our weekly calls a reminder that being seen for who you truly are is life's most precious gift. The empire I'd built hadn't been constructed as a monument to prove my family wrong. I'd built it because creating was in my nature, the same nature they had tried to suppress or redirect. The greatest revelation wasn't showing them my success at that Christmas dinner. It was realizing I no longer needed their approval to feel complete. So what lessons did I learn from this journey? That validation must come from within before it can come from others. That success is defined by purpose, not just profit. That family can be both your greatest wound and your greatest teacher. And most importantly, that the most powerful response to being underestimated is not resentment, but excellence. I built my empire for myself, not to prove them wrong. The greatest gift wasn't revealing my success. It was discovering I no longer needed their approval to feel complete. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most? How did you respond to that challenge? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of overcoming family expectations. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the people who don't believe in your dreams are the ones who inspire you to prove them wrong.